In this video, I share how I crochet a basic one-color granny square. I walk you through all the steps along the making, including all the little details. I've been making a granny square blanket for my family, and it's made out of one-color basic granny squares. Each square is made out of 6 rounds. In my previous video, I shared my progress on this project, and you asked if I can share a tutorial of how I crochet my squares. For my blanket, I used the Knitting for Olive heavy merino, and I used a 4mm crochet hook. And this is what I'll be using for this basic granny square tutorial. I'll be sharing some special steps I make, and at the end of the video, I'll share my way to close the last round to get the squares seamlessly ready to be joined. If you're not new to my channel, you already know that I'm a left-handed crocheter and a right-handed knitter, but after years of teaching mainly right-handed crocheters, I decided to start teaching also here on YouTube. I hope you'll enjoy learning with me. Let's make a basic granny square. I start my granny squares with a magic loop, but here is what you do in case you don't like to use the magic loop method. You simply start by making a chain 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slip stitch into the first chain. And now this is the ring. You just form the ring, and everything you make in the first round, you will be making into the center of this ring. So in this case, it's going to be a chain 5, followed by a double crochet. So you make your double crochet into the center of the ring, just like so. So this is how you start if you don't use the magic loop method. And here is how I start my basic granny square using my magic loop method. I will put this section of the video in a slow motion for you so you can watch it again and again and try to do it with me. And this is my magic loop. And now we are ready to start round 1. First, we want to start with a chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This counts as my first double crochet and first chain space. Next, I'm going to make 3 double crochet stitches into the center of this ring. 1, 2, and 3. And this is a 3 DC cluster, 3 double crochet cluster into the center of the ring. So from now on, I will call the 3 double crochet stitches 3 DC cluster. Next, I'm going to chain 3 for space, for corner space. And now I will repeat it 2 more times. So 3 DC cluster followed by 3 chain stitches. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 chain stitches, and again 3 DC cluster, and 3 chain stitches. Now I want to take this short yarn end and give it a little tug. And as you can see, I have 3 DC clusters and I want to complete the 4th one. And this chain 5 I made at the beginning of the round counts as my first double crochet stitch. So in order to complete the last cluster, I want to add 2 more double crochet stitches next to this first one. So 1 and 2. And this is my 4th cluster. And to close this round, I want to make a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of my initial chain 5. So let's find the 3rd chain together. This is the first one, this little V stitch. This is the 2nd chain, and this is the 3rd chain. I want to insert my hook right into the middle of this chain stitch and go under the bar loop as well. So you have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through everything on your hook, and this is a slip stitch. Last thing I want to do in this round is making sure I create a nice and aesthetic center hole to my basic granny square. So I want to give this short yarn end a little tug and close and shape the center hole. And this is how I like to have my center hole on my granny squares. So this is the first round made, and now we are ready to move on and start round 2. And I start my new round with a slip stitch into the corner space next to me. So I insert my hook right into the corner space under the chain corner space and make a slip stitch. And this is the first step on my 2nd round. Next, chain 5. And next I'm going to make a 3 DC cluster into the same corner space. Chain 1 and make the next corner space. And what I'm going to do here is a 3 DC cluster, chain 3 for the new corner space, and a 3 DC cluster, and I will make all these stitches into the next chain space. And the second 3 DC cluster. And you can move your stitches a little bit backwards to make a space for all the stitches. Chain 1, and I'm going to make the same corner that I created here right into the next corner space. So a 3 DC cluster, chain 3, and another DC cluster. Chain 1 and make the same in the next chain space. 2, 3 double crochet stitches, 1, 2, 3 chain stitches, 1, 2, 3 double crochet stitches and chain 1. Now I want to complete my first corner, and I know the chain 5 counts as 1 double crochet and a chain space. So I want to add 2 more double crochet stitches right next to my chain 5. So 1 and 2, and now I want to slip stitch into the third chain from my initial chain 5. So 1, 2, 3, and I insert my hook into the middle of this chain stitch and make sure to go under the bar loop behind it. Slip stitch, and this is the second round. And in case you wonder why I leave 2 chain stitches for the corner, I just find that it creates the same size of corner space for me if I leave 2 chain stitches for the first corner and not 3 chain stitches. So this is the way I make my granny squares. You can make 3 chain stitches, and you can start with 6 chain stitches at the beginning of each round. For me, 5 works just fine. It creates an even space for all the 4 corner spaces in my granny square. So this was round 2, and we are ready to move to round 3. We start with a slip stitch right into this space and chain 5. Next, I want to make 3 DC cluster and chain 1. And now between corner to the next corner I have one more space, and this is where I am going to make a 3 DC cluster, and it will be the side cluster. So let's make 3 DC cluster into the side space, chain 1 to separate between the clusters. Next we will make the corner, so 3 DC cluster, chain 3 and 3 DC cluster right into the next corner space. One, 2, 3. And a chain 1. Another DC cluster into the side space, so this is a side 3 DC cluster, chain 1 to separate between clusters and make the new corner, 3 double crochet stitches, 1, 2, 3 chain stitches, and 3 double crochet stitches, chain 1, side cluster, chain 1, corner clusters, chain 1, the last side cluster, chain 1, and now I want to complete my first side cluster, so I'm going to add 2 more double crochet stitches into the first chain space, 1 and 2, and to close I'll make a slip stitch into the third chain, 1, 2, 3. This is the third round made, and this is how it looks. And now we are ready to move on to round 4. So once again, I'm going to start by slip stitch into the next chain space under the next chain space. So this is the starting point of the next round. Chain 5, 3DC cluster, and chain 1 to separate between clusters. And now you can see we have 2 spaces between corner spaces, so 2 side DC clusters to make. 1 DC cluster, chain 1, and the second DC cluster, chain 1, and now we are ready to make the next corner clusters. And as you make your squares bigger and bigger, in each round you will have more side clusters to make. Chain 1, and now you have 2 side clusters to make, and in the following round we will have 3 side clusters. And I'll go ahead and complete the 4th round. And now I've reached my first corner, and I will complete the first corner DC cluster with 2 double crochet stitches, and to close, a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of my initial chain 5. And this is the 4th round completed. Okay, round 5. Slip stitch into the next corner space, chain 5, 3 DC cluster into the same corner space, chain 1, and next we will make 3 DC cluster into each of the next 3 side spaces till we reach the next corner. Chain 1 between clusters, this is how I did in my 6 rounds basic granny square for the blanket I am busy making. Next is a corner, so 3 DC cluster, chain 3, and a 3 DC cluster. Oops. Chain 1, and side clusters, chain 1, and now I'm at the first corner again, so I will add 2 double crochet stitches into the first corner to complete my first 3 DC cluster, and a slip stitch in the 3rd chain to close the round. And this is round 5 made. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds made we have just one more round to make till we complete my 6 rounds basic granny square. I start my last round a little bit different, so let me show you what I do. So first I want to slip stitch into the corner space next to me. Next I want to chain 3. So instead of chain 5 as I did in all previous rounds, in my last round I start with chain 3. So let me show you how I crochet my final round. So at the end of this round I will explain why I changed here to 3 chain stitches at the beginning instead of 5. Next I want to double crochet into the same space, make a chain 3 for corner space, and then a 3DC cluster. Chain 1, and I'll make a side cluster in each of the next 4 side spaces. So a 3DC cluster and a chain 1 in each of the next spaces. So next is a corner cluster, 3DC cluster, chain 3, and 3DC cluster into the corner space. Chain 1, and let me finish up my last round. I will make a 3DC cluster in each space and a corner cluster in each corner space, and I'll meet you when I'm back here at the point where I started. So now we are at the end of round 6, and I want to complete the first corner. So as you can see, I have 2 double crochet stitches, 3 chain stitches for the corner space, and a 3DC cluster, and I want to add 1 more double crochet stitch right next to the first 3 chain stitches. And now I want to close the round using the invisible join, and this is why I shifted my beginning of round and I just started with a chain 3. I want to cut the yarn, leaving a little bit of a yarn end that I can then weave in. Now I want to pull the loop all the way up and thread the yarn onto a tapestry needle, and I want to make the invisible join. And the reason why I shifted my beginning of round is because I want to be able to skip this chain 3, the third chain, and use the first through double crochet I made for my invisible join. And here is how I make the invisible join. I insert my tapestry needle under both loops of the first double crochet I made in the round, the first true double crochet I made in the round. So I skipped the 3 chain stitches. And now I insert my needle back into the last stitch I made in this round, so right here, and I want to make sure I go under the bar loop behind it. So I have 2 loops on my tapestry needle. And I just created a fake stitch, and it created a nice seamless and clean edge. And I prefer to use the invisible joint to close my last round because it's gonna help me while I'm ready to join the squares. So I have all the stitches at the edge looks the same. Yeah, so this is the way I close my granny squares. And now, because I already have the tapestry needle in hand, I'll use it and weave in the yarn end. So what I usually do, I go down a little bit under the stitches, making sure it will not show on the right side. And I go under all the legs of the stitches in this corner below. I go a little bit to this direction and then I go back just to make sure I secure this yarn end. You can go to the round below and do the same here in this corner space, just to make sure you secure the yarn end really good. So this is enough for me, and I can cut the yarn. And now I'm gonna secure the first tail I have here in the center of my granny square. So I'll just go under the stitches around the first round. Yep, now I'm ready to cut this yarn, and my basic granny square is ready. And yeah, this is how I make my 6 rounds granny square. It has the same number of stitches in each side of the square. On the last round, I made sure I have 3 chain stitches in each corner. Now I will make more and more of these squares, and when I have them all ready, I will be joining them using the stitches in each side of the square. So this is why I wanted to make sure I have the same amount of stitches in each corner, the same number of stitches in each side of the square. So this was my tutorial, and this is how I make my simple basic one color granny square. I hope you enjoy this video tutorial with me. I hope you find it helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.